Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Eric, I'm the account manager for Connecting Up in TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is part of the Info Exchange Group, and Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. Today, I would love to welcome you to the webinar, Digital Marketing for Nonprofits, Generating Insights from Google Analytics, which will be presented by Tim Brack from Leafcutter. We'll start with just a little bit of housekeeping here. All the lines are going to be muted, so if you have any technical issues, please just type that in your questions box in the webinar panel, and I'll do my best to help troubleshoot that with you. If you've got any questions during the session, just type it in the questions box as well, and Tim will tackle those at the end of the webinar. Do note that your comments and questions won't be appearing to the entire group, though they will just appear to me. If you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, that can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar, so if possible, just close down your other programs just so you can have the best experience that you can today. Do note this webinar is also being recorded, and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you there'll be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We would appreciate it if you could take just a few minutes to provide us with a bit of feedback on how it all goes today. Otherwise, that's it for me for now. So over to you, Tim. Thanks.
Super, thanks so much, and thanks everyone for joining today's webinar, and thanks again if you happen to be on last week's as well. So we're kind of continuing the chat about Google Analytics, just getting a little bit deeper today into a couple of the kind of topics that we didn't really have time to kind of squeeze into last week. And today we're kind of looking at a few things about how to kind of get more out of the reports, how to kind of record more information on your website about how people are using, interacting with your website, and then also how to create a custom report too. And that can be quite useful for just choosing more specifically, the information that you want to see in these kind of reports. Just kind of really quickly, as kind of mentioned, my name's Tim. I work for Leafcutter, which is a technology partner for nonprofits and purpose-driven organizations in Australia. So we help people with obviously websites and web development technologies, and also marketing tools and technology as well. So if you have any kind of questions after today, feel free to get in touch. I've got an email address on the slides, so events@leafcutter.com.au. We also have a kind of a companion guide to this kind of talk and last week's as well, with just kind of a few kind of links, a few kind of tips as well, just so you don't have to kind of frantically scribble down any notes. So today we're talking about a few different things. So we're talking about tracking more than just page views, which is what default Google Analytics gets us. We're talking about tracking campaigns a little bit more effectively, and I'll explain a little bit about campaign tagging and what that is, and how to kind of approach that. And then I'll touch on custom reports, and then just a little bit about cleaning up data, because sometimes just because of how Google Analytics stores the information, it can just kind of create a couple of problems in the reports, or kind of overload us with information in a certain couple of different areas. So I won't spend as much on that last topic. The first three are probably the most important things, and again, we'll kind of touch on that one. Time for questions at the end, so please feel free to leave them in the chat whenever you do, and we'll kind of come around to those at the end of today's talk. So first really important point is just kind of confirming, what are you actually going to do with the data? So if you're going to all this kind of effort, if you're using Google Analytics, last week I kind of touched on that. Ideally, what we should be doing is, kind of having this kind of this information, analyzing those results. Ideally, kind of improving things, getting better returns on the time that we invest and the money we invest into, our campaigns, our content, our website, whatever it is, and having some sort of insight and having that kind of drive action. Unfortunately, you might be in the situation of just, there's no time. Analytics doesn't tend to be urgent, whereas a lot of our things are urgent and on fire and need attention right now. And one of those things is not website analytics. It's very rarely urgent. But it is the sort of thing that can really help with results. If you're kind of thinking about messaging or campaigns and you want to improve those things over time, it can be kind of hard to do that unless it's been tracked and tracked properly, and then someone does have that time to look at the results and see how to kind of think about what's the next thing we can change, how can we improve things over time. So that's kind of the precursor to the rest of what we talk about. The whole, if we're not going to do anything with the data, well, there's not much point improving it if we're not going to do anything with it. You can save yourself a lot of time that way. But hopefully you are in the situation, and hopefully just being on today's webinar means, like, we want to do things better. We want to take charge of our information, of our data, and we want to kind of improve things. So let's kind of use these tools that we have access to do it. So the first kind of thing is tracking more than just page views. And this comes back to kind of default Google Analytics and what it gives us. So when you go to a website and the JavaScript loads on that page for Google Analytics, your browser then sends a message over to Google Analytics, and all it's kind of telling, which kind of feels like magic, and all it's telling Google at that time is just, oh, hey, a page was loaded. It doesn't actually tell you anything beyond that. So it happens for every single page. Go to the home page or about page or the contact page, whatever it is, and those messages go to Google and say, Google, this page has been looked at. But we don't know anything else. It only is that the JavaScript was loaded in the browser. So we wouldn't really know how far down the page people scrolled or what else they interacted with on that page. Each page itself is just kind of isolated from every other page. They're just kind of aggregate numbers of pages that were viewed on the website, as opposed to what did someone do on that page. And this is what I mean by moving beyond just that a page view happened, which is the JavaScript got loaded in the browser, because I want to build up a bigger picture, a better picture about how people interact with the website, and kind of make that information as rich as I can, so then I can make decisions about about the content I have or the design, or optimize things over time. And so these are some of the areas I'll kind of normally look at to optimize. And normally I'll just kind of do it by talking with a client, figuring out what kind of objectives they have, what are they trying to do with their website, and what do their audiences, the different kind of target audiences, what are they coming to the website for? What are those kind of different purposes? Sometimes there'll be fundraising, but not always. There's often a lot of different audiences that you might have, and a lot of different kind of purposes for different things on the website. So, but a few that I'll typically kind of look out for is, the first obvious one is, do people actually read the content? And by that I mean, did they scroll through it? Like I won't know exactly if they read it or not. We're not tracking their eyes and giving them a pop quiz at the end, but did they actually scroll through that kind of content? And if they did, how far down did they get? Did they kind of get to the end of an article, halfway through? We can set those different scroll points and then track that on a page by page level. And so then the kind of, the questions we can answer is, well, how far through the content did people get? And that might help us then optimize how long our content should be. And this is not just blogs; it could be, resources or other kind of, service descriptions, anything else like that on your website that you kind of have. And quite often I'll get that kind of question, particularly around search engine optimization, which is, oh, how long should this be? And I'm like, well, let's kind of check how much people are reading right now, and we can answer that question in a bunch of different ways. But let's kind of look at things like, okay, well, which content has better read rates? And then if I find that some content on my website, it's disproportionately low, people just don't scroll through it, maybe that's a sign that that actually the content is not necessarily as good as other content on the website, and it could be like it's an opportunity to refresh it. Similarly, with content that has great read rates, maybe it's like, oh, cool, should we write anything else around that topic? Or is there anything else we can add to this that might improve that experience? So at least we kind of get a little bit of insight from that. Again, we're just kind of building this picture. Not only the page got loaded, but hey, people actually went through this content and they looked at it. Another part I'll kind of look at is, quite often, we'll all have links on our websites that leave our websites. Things like links to your social profiles or social share icons. You might have resources externally or partners or whatever it is. But you'll have links on your website that leave the website, and I want to be able to track that. Like if we're sending people off the website, well, where are they going, and how frequently does it happen? And again, that can just help us kind of optimize, where are we sending traffic? And if I'm going to have those social icons, especially social sharing, does anyone click on it or not? Because if no one's clicking on it, then that doesn't necessarily look good when every icon just says 0 shares, and it also can take the website a little bit longer to load when it's loading in those things. So key question there is, where are we sending our traffic, and is that a good thing or not? So especially if you find a lot of traffic is leaving where maybe you weren't intending it to, or the contrary is like, oh yeah, no one's clicking on that link or that resource, so maybe we need to change the design or make it a bit more prominent. At least if you're measuring that, then you can make changes to try and improve whatever your objective is for those links. quite often our websites will have contact options. It's not just about filling in forms, which is relatively easy for us to track with website analytics, but we'll have phone numbers and email addresses on our websites as well. And while on a desktop, like if you're on a laptop or a desktop, you're not really going to click on a phone number because that would, it'd be kind of weird, nothing would happen. But your model, you could obviously click on those little email icons or an email address, and that would just fire up whatever the default email client is on that machine. To date, we kind of don't really have visibility over that. And I always like to just kind of track that, especially with the phone numbers on mobile, because you can do click to call, really, really simple user experience then. They don't have to kind of try to like highlight and copy the phone number and then paste it in their phone, which is just a horrible experience. But at least we can get some visibility over that happening. And then I kind of want to know, all right, I'm sending traffic from campaigns. If people aren't filling in the forms, or they're not doing like one of those actions that they are using the phone number, or they are using email addresses, well, what are they interacting with, and how often does it happen? Because maybe it is that people are phoning in and then they do whatever the conversion is you want over the phone, and website analytics won't see that because the tracking doesn't really work that way by default. And if I want a way to kind of visualize that, then I can actually track those interactions. Again, anything that someone kind of clicks on or anything they interact with can be measured through Google Analytics. So that'd be another thing I'd look out for. By the way, there is a technology out there that will that can change the phone number on your website depending on how people get to your website. So it could swap out, so that the 1300 number that you see on the screen there, that could like change that number if, say, someone came through a Facebook campaign. And there are a few different providers of that sort of solution. So that is a possibility as well. All right. Other content as well. So not everything is a web page on your website. You might have a lot of reports or guides or how-tos or anything like that in downloadable format, so PDFs. You might have videos as well. And a lot of people just use embedded YouTube videos or Vimeo or another video player. And again, they're all kind of good to use. But if someone interacts with those elements, well, that's not a page view. So Google Analytics by default isn't going to see that anything happened. And really, I want to build this kind of picture. So if those are important downloadables, then I want to know, like, how many times did they get clicked on? Because that's the action we can track. We can track the click, or if you're on mobile, the tap. With the video, which videos were started, which were stopped, how far through did someone watch? And on what page did that happen. Now with the video tracking, you'll still have that in your YouTube channel, so you'll still see the metrics over there. But what YouTube won't know is that, okay, the traffic from Facebook coming to your website looked at the video with this level of engagement rate, whereas the traffic from somewhere else maybe was lower than the Facebook one. So you don't have that comparison of where the traffic came from, and cross-checking that with the interactions with that website content. Similarly for FAQs, so if you have FAQs on your website, which is a kind of a nice way to just round up a bunch of questions people might have, quite often they're displayed in an accordion style format. So I've got that in the bottom right of the slide where you click on it and it shows the answer. A lot of times you just have a giant list and you might have no idea what information people are looking for. And so you don't actually know, well, what do they interact with? But that's relatively easy for us to track, again, as another interaction on our website. And so quite often what I'll do with that sort of tracking is just say, okay, they're clicking on these sorts of answers that happen to be in the middle of the list, which means they're kind of scanning through that list to find the thing they really want. Maybe we need to reorder this, maybe we need to group it in a different way that is easier for people to scan, or is it easier for them to kind of to quickly kind of move through to find the answer they want, rather than just putting the questions we would like them to ask at the top. Let's kind of reorganize it based on how people are interacting with it, and then we can keep amending that over time to make it as user-centric, I guess, as possible. So the kind of question I can answer there is when it's not just page views but other content as well, is okay, what is being viewed and what are the different levels of interaction that we have. All right. Okay, so another kind of one that I do like to do, and this is kind of comes to an interesting point about Google Analytics and your website, which is The website, Google Analytics only tracks what happened after the fact. It tells you yesterday you had, this many visits and this many pages were looked at. It never tells you if that was a good experience or not. That's always kind of a really missing part of website analytics. And so when you might have people saying, oh, we need to increase the number of pages people look at or increase the amount of time people spend on a website. Well, it's like, well, yeah, we could do that, but we could also make it a worse experience for people at the same time. It's not just increasing time doesn't necessarily mean it's a better experience. There could be a trade-off there. We just don't know because we don't collect that information by default. So quite often I'll add some sort of tracking mechanism where I'm collecting that sort of information. I might be getting more qualitative feedback, and I might often have like a question which, again, if you have kind of content or articles, it could be a question at the end of the article saying, was this article helpful? Could be a question like, did you find what you were looking for today? Did you find the information? Whatever it is, there are many variations of that kind of question. And then we can track that yes or no, or if it's a star rating scale, we can track those answers and again, push them into Google Analytics as well. So then we have this actually richer source of information about the content on a website. And if we have that all together, we can actually then figure out, well, what's our positive or negative feedback rate based on page by page? And that might then highlight content on the website that has, oh yeah, this content, actually the negative comments or negative kind of feedback on this content is much higher than our average. And it might actually highlight there's a big problem between the expectations of people going to that page, the content they find there, and the question they're actually trying to answer. So while the feedback rate might not be huge, like it's not going to be like 10% of everyone that views the page leaves feedback, but it's going to be enough for us to kind of get improvements going. Because people who are either very positive or very negative will tend to look for those kind of options. And at least with the kind of like we don't always focus on the negative, but at least if we then have was it helpful, yes or no? If they hit no, then there's a text box that appears. Be like, okay, how could we improve this article? And then you are collecting that qualitative information as well, and that might highlight gaps in content that you have, or things that aren't even on your website, let alone that page that you could add to that as well. And even potentially a mechanism for getting back to people through that. So that's something I do like to look out for and add to the different websites that I work on, and also just to mix the really quantitative data that we have in Google Analytics with something which is a bit more about feedback mechanisms on our website. One of my kind of favorite things to look at as well is I've worked with a number of kind of clients, and they might have carousels or sliders on their website. And one thing I'm always like, a big slider on the homepage, some people kind of really like them. It's always a question then, okay, how many images should there be? And I years and years ago, I had one client, it's like, let's have like 8 images. I'm like, no one's going to wait for 8 images to load properly and scroll through, so there's not much point. But what was always kind of missing there is the tracking then of, okay, was there an impression? Did the slider load when people were looking at it or not? And then if it did load, like, was there a click on it? And what was the position that this image and this message was in? And that's kind of another thing I want to collect, because if 0.01% of people are seeing that third image, well, you may as well delete the third image and onwards, because no one's seeing it. So you may as well kind of get rid of that and just kind of focus the user experience a lot more. If we're collecting the position as well, and we know what message each of those images has, then we can kind of figure out a click-through rate by message and position. And what's really useful about that is, well, we could test different images in there about the kind of same message and see which one gets a better click-through rate. We can also see like what's disproportionately high or disproportionately low depending on the position. Because of course the first image is going to have the most views. But what if that kind of second image, we have something that's like, oh, it's really performing really well, disproportionately well compared to being in that kind of second spot. We know it's kind of like a really resonating really highly with our audience. And the reverse would be true as well. It might be, oh, no, this message, it's really not working. In which case we might need to switch it out for a different type of creative, or kind of figure out what else we can kind of do with that. But at least this sort of tracking allows us to figure that out. It's like, okay, let's give visibility now to these interactions and see what are people actually looking at, what are they clicking at on the website. All right, another one, searching. And by the way, I'm just kind of running through these examples, and I'll kind of explain like more of the how, and that kind of comes with the guide as well. Some websites, simple search might just be a text search only, and that's relatively easy for us to track. Other websites might have like some sort of filtering option or like a selection option that you kind of do, and that could be searching about the content of your website. It might be a particular service that you offer, or it might be if you have like an online store as well. You might have kind of searching and filtering through there. And again, I just like to capture a bit more information about how people search, if they're filtering, like what filter options do they use, and then kind of what results are returned. So a big one would be, okay, people are looking for these services in this location, but we don't have any availability for a service in that kind of location. So it might actually highlight a bit of a gap where there might be demand, but we're not really seeing that demand very, very clearly, but through our search function on our website, maybe it does expose it. So you can kind of use that information outside of just a marketing or fundraising context, and that might go to like a service delivery kind of context. But think about any kind of search people can do on your website. Can they filter that? How that's kind of being captured at the moment is probably not in the best way, but there's a lot of ways we can expose those searches and just kind of see like how people interacting with it. What are they actually searching for? A big one is a multi-step form. So you might have people moving through steps. Again, they might not be separate page views, might just be the one page, but it loads different kind of steps on that page. I want to capture that because I really want to know where are people dropping out and can we improve that process. There might also be opportunities to remarket to people based on, hey, they got to the last page or the second last page in that form, but they didn't, for whatever reason, finish the transaction. Let's like send them, show them an ad or send them emails based on, oh, you got really, really close, like, and then send them a link, and maybe we can get them back to the website to finish that process. All right, so all of these additional things, these additional interactions that we want to track, they're done with what's called a Google Analytics event. And so there's page views and events. They're just different types of interactions. So in your reports under behavior, you have site content. That's where all the page views live. And then there's also this events group of reports as well. And that's where all the event interactions live. And there are kind of one or two other interactions, but these are going to be the bulk of what you might track on your website. If you have e-commerce, that's another type of interaction, but really it's kind of, most websites aren't e-commerce, so it really kind of comes down to these two then. And again, the default that we get with Google Analytics is page views. That's already kind of running. Once the code's on your website, you get all the page views. And then what I want to add on is that second bunch of interactions, which depends on the website that you have and what happens on that website, but it just kind of shows a bit more activity, a bit more about what's going on that website. And then I can make better decisions about content or campaigns from that. So the how is now the kind of trickier part, because of course it's easy to talk about like the why. So the how is that the browser that someone uses, so if I'm using Chrome, that browser needs to figure out, well, when does it tell Google that there's interaction? And it's all based on JavaScript. You can also use Google Tag Manager. Now, one thing I didn't want to go to in a webinar, because it'd be insane, is to give you kind of like JavaScript code snippets and talk about that. That's nuts. We have a kind of a guide that we can send along with this with some code examples of just how I'd typically approach it. So if you're the person that looks after your website, you could kind of use those examples or look into Google Tag Manager and how that kind of works. If you are just kind of responsible maybe for marketing or fundraising and you want some of this tracking, but someone else looks after the website, okay, you now know, it's a possibility. This is kind of possible, so you can tell them that you want to kind of expand what you kind of track on the website. So we do have those kind of code examples of how to get some of this kind of running. The one thing I will kind of say, if you don't want to wait for those examples, you could just search. But the kind of getting started is normally just thinking about, okay, looking at your website and thinking about the audience that's coming there and the different reasons why they come there. What is anything they could interact with? And by that, I mean anything they click on or anything they look at that you would want to track. So look at, well, when they scroll down the page, they're looking at different parts of the page. When they're clicking on a PDF or a zip file or a Word document, whatever it is, to download it, that's clicking on something. When they look at a carousel slider, okay, that's an impression. So it's kind of any of those sorts of interactions that people look at. So make that list then. Come up with that kind of list of things, and you can just use some of the examples I spoke about in these slides. That could even get you kind of started. That's totally fine, and then you might expand it over time and just kind of see what's useful or not. So the first step is just come up with that list. Here's everything we want to get more visibility on our website, how people interact with us there. And the second step is that there's a hierarchy of information for a Google Analytics event. And the hierarchy is there's an event category, an event action, and an event label, right? So, and that's just kind of ways of grouping these events together. For example, if we're talking about downloads on my website, so I've got downloads, what can people download? They can download a report, and then specifically which report? Okay, it's like my 2019 report.pdf, right? And that particular interaction is different to might be different to someone downloading case study 1.pdf. Okay, so I have this hierarchy of information. And the downloads is going to be stored differently to, say, the contact us. So people clicking on a phone number or people clicking on, say, an email address, right? So there's a hierarchy that kind of goes along with those. Again, we could, rather than spending heaps of time on that, we'll kind of go through. It's more just let you know this is possible. This is a great way to build up a better picture about what happens on the website. All right, so that's about kind of the content side, about people interacting with the website, again, getting that kind of better picture, especially exposing things that are just, you have no idea that they're even happening or not. And when it comes to decisions about kind of design, you know, if it's your donation kind of form, or if it's like a search function on your website and just no one knows how people use it, that's always like if it's an important part of your website, that's always really, really dangerous, because it might be that it's being used badly or it's not necessarily designed all that well, in which case you're kind of missing out opportunities to improve it. All right, so the second part then is, is driving traffic to your website. And a lot of you will be using kind of campaigns, or it could even be just trying to rank really well in Google. And this is kind of where we talk about how Google Analytics will store this information and where to kind of look in the reports for this, and how we can kind of set our own campaign tracking values. So with the website traffic we drive, there's normally kind of a couple questions we want to know, like where is the traffic coming from and what does it do? And that's pretty much it. That's really what I want to know from all this activity that I'm trying to do. And so Google has a bunch of default reports for this. The first one is like a channel report, which is just kind of this big grouping together, and it shows these kind of metrics in all these default reports, things like how much traffic came to the website, what did it do when it got there, rough kind of engagement metrics, and then there's like conversions as well that hopefully happen after that. And that way you can see the performance with this comparison. So my organic search did better than paid search, or what is this side-by-side comparison when looking at these metrics. Now when we think about the traffic and where it comes from, Google Analytics uses five values to categorize that traffic and kind of group it together. And so that's what we have to work with in the reports. And you would have seen this in a few of the reports, things like source and medium and campaign. And channel is another one we'll talk about as well. So I'll just kind of run through what those five are, and we can talk about them a little bit more. So the source, the traffic source, is literally where did someone click on a link to get to your website. So, they clicked on a link on facebook.com or youtube.com, wherever it is. Like someone clicked on a link somewhere to get to your website. Where was it when there was that traffic source? The medium then is like a bucket of if we're going to group these sources together, what should we like? How would we group these sources together? So that's kind of what mediums are for. So for example, there's a medium of organic, and that just means organic search. Referral is just links from other websites. CPC in that kind of list is meant to be paid search traffic. So there's all these mediums that we have. You can make up your own mediums. It's not just kind of Google has like set ones, so you can make up your own. And there's just kind of ways for you to group the traffic together of where people come from to your website. And so I normally come up with new ones around, like if I'm doing paid social activity, I might have a medium for that. If I have links in PDFs that I send out, I might have a specific link way that I might do a link in those PDFs as well. So you kind of have a lot of flexibility with how you do those mediums in your reports. And we'll talk a bit about how that can impact the channels. We also have a spreadsheet for managing these. So if you kind of need a way to kind of manage them and at least you can share it with your team, it's just a Google Sheet, which you're more than welcome to have a copy of. Now the medium is different to the channel. So a channel kind of sits above the medium and that's just more like the biggest level of grouping you can have. Often they'll be more or less the same, but there's a few cases where they're different. I've got an example of where they're different. So campaign, then, the campaign value in Google Analytics, just a way of grouping together traffic. And this might be your 2019 tax campaign, for example. And for your 2019 tax, you might have search, you might have ads on Facebook, you might have emails that go out. So in Google Analytics, if you wanted to roll all that activity together and look at it just as like a big kind of whole, you could do it by a campaign field, which will group all that activity together, even though it crosses over different sources and mediums. The two more, and these are less frequently used. So one is the ad content. This is for split testing. So if you have two links or two ads coming to your website where the other values are the same, so the source is the same, the medium is the same, the campaign is the same, but I want to see, does my ad 1 or ad 2, which one's more effective when someone lands on my website? Well, I can use the ad content for that. It's like a pretty easy way to see that in the results. And then the last one is term. So this is the keyword. It's mainly used for search, and it's where someone does a search into a search engine, and then they click on your result. What was the keyword that they typed in? This used to work really, really well for organic search. Now it pretty much only works for paid search, which is a bit of a shame, but a lot of the organic search keywords are just not provided anymore in the reports. And that's Google just deciding that they're not going to do that anymore. So anyway, that's another kind of topic for another day. All right, so we've got these kind of 5 values: source, medium, campaign, content, and term. And then we have a channel. Now channel, and when you go into the reports, there's acquisition, all traffic, and channels. A channel is just this kind of big grouping of all that traffic together. And there are 9 channels that are set up by default in every Google Analytics account. Really important about channels is they don't have to just be 9. Like, you can totally customize these. These are just the 9 that Google came up with to work for everybody. I think that, they're kind of okay, but it's not necessarily the best kind of grouping, and you're probably going to want to get a bit more granular in a few different areas. So for example, organic, like you could split up organic search into people landing on the homepage versus people landing on other parts of the website. You could split up social into paid social and organic social, which is something I definitely recommend if you're doing Facebook ads. And then the channel called other, you don't really want that to be in there. That just means there's been a campaign and Google doesn't know what channel to put it in. It has no logic to help with that. We can talk about that again a bit later as well. So we have these kind of channels, and this might be what you typically look at in the reports. You might also jump into source medium, which is going to show all of the traffic to your website and not kind of grouped in any particularly logical way. So here's a few examples of just like what happens. Like if I click on a link, and what source and medium will Google Analytics use? So this is just from I was on Facebook and I just saw this link from Channel 9 News in Sydney. And if I click on that link, it's just, you can see that the URL there, it's just http 9news.com.au in the ad. If I click on that, it just goes to their homepage, right? And there was no UTM values, or there's no kind of campaign tagging in that link. So I was like, okay, cool. That's a pretty easy example. In that case, here are the values. Like Google would say the source is facebook.com, the medium is referral, there's no campaign content or keyword. That wasn't set with this link. So in that case, from these values, Google Analytics would say, okay, the channel is social because it's referral traffic, but it's from a social source. It's from facebook.com, and Google Analytics knows, okay, that's social. So it'll put it in the social channel. Another example, I had like an email, it's just like a link to billing FAQs. Again, I clicked on the link, there's no campaign tracking on that link, and I was just in Gmail. And so when I look in Gmail, when I kind of click on it, In Google Analytics, the source would mail.google.com, so literally where the click happened. The medium would be referral, so it should be lowercase r. The channel would also actually be referral. It's not going to be email because I didn't use campaign tagging. I didn't use UTM values on that link, or whoever sent it to me didn't use that on that link. So they wouldn't actually see that it came from email. They would just see referral, which groups in with traffic from kind of a lot of other kind of places. And again, I'll show you kind of how to make a UTM in a moment. It's a link with campaign tagging as part of the link. Because obviously we want to avoid this sort of situation where we have like emails showing up under referral when really there is another way to separate that, another channel called email. So another example, again, I do a search, financial support for carers, that first link there to the human services website. When I follow that link, the source, google.com, the medium is organic. There's no campaign, there's no content. I mentioned organic keywords are no longer provided, so that would just say not provided. And then the channel is organic search. Okay, that's okay. All right, so in that case, what about if I had a paid campaign or if I wanted to change those values? Because sometimes those default values, they're not very helpful, like the email example and even the social example. If that was a paid ad for nine years, I don't know if it was or not. It said suggested content. I can't quite remember if that's paid. I don't think it is, but it says a sponsored one as well. Anyway, so the default values aren't super helpful. And so we can actually override whatever that default value is going to be. We can actually override them with what are called UTMs or campaign tags. And this is where you take a link to your website, you add all this stuff to the end of the link, and that tells Google Analytics where the traffic came from, values that you specify. And that's the source, the medium, the campaign, and if you want it, the content and the term, if it's necessary. Here's an example. So search for RSPCA New South Wales. There's a link here in Google going to one of their websites, the Guardian Angel website. Now, if I just click on that link and let's say there was no campaign tagging, it would come up as organic search because it's google.com. Google Analytics would say, oh, okay, well that's got to be organic traffic, and then it'll be organic search. But in this case, it's an ad. In which case we definitely want that campaign tagging. We definitely want those UTM values so that it doesn't show up as organic search because it's not. Like I'm paying for that click or I'm paying for someone to see the ad if you're paying cost per impression. And we want that to be in a different grouping. We want that to be in paid search. And so how we do that is we take the link to our website. So in this case, RSPCA guardianangel.com.au, and then we add the UTM value to the end. Okay, so it starts with the question mark. You've then got these extra kind of values on there. So what have I put in? I put in a source, I put in a medium, I put in the campaign, in this case, the content. They're not using term, that's totally fine. And that's kind of what, now we've got a link with the UTMs in it. And again, I've got a spreadsheet that helps manage this kind of process. So you don't have to manually type it out because that'd be very annoying. All right, so I've got these kind of values on a link. Now, if that is now in the ad, pointing people to your website, and people click on that, then those are the values Google Analytics will use. So it'd be like the source is still google.com or .com.au, whichever one it is. Google still knows where the traffic comes from because it's in the UTM. The medium now, rather than organic, it's CPC, so cost per click, and that's applied to paid search. The campaign is the campaign I've set up in whatever ad platform I'm using. So in this case, it would be Google Ads. I might have multiple ads, and this one actually differentiates, ad 1 to ad 2, and then the keyword is the keyword that someone's searched for. So I can actually track all that information, and all of that gets passed into Google Analytics. So the benefit being, I could see, okay, well, how does all the people that came to my website from ad 1 versus ad 2, how did they perform? Did ad 2, was that better at getting people to actually, hopefully donate in this instance? Because maybe it got less clicks, but it got a higher rate of donation. So maybe it's actually way better for the outcome I'm looking for. And in this case, because I've used a medium of CPC, the channel will be paid search now rather than organic search, which is a better kind of grouping for this, and just means it's more accurate metrics when I'm going to those traffic reports. All right, so benefits of campaign tagging then. It's just seeing what happens after the click. That's all it's really about. It's about grouping traffic in different ways and just being able to see, okay, when they come from this ad or when they come from this campaign, what happens after they've clicked on the link to my website? Do they convert or not? And it's just ways of aggregating that in different in different ways. You don't get new magical metrics that don't exist in Google Analytics normally. Like, it's still the same metrics. It's still the same number of, here's how many visits, here's the engagement metrics, bounce rates and pages per session, and here's the conversion rates. It's just looking at it in different ways and grouping it in different ways. And maybe that's enough for you to see, oh, hey, no, this specific campaign that worked really well, but this other campaign was hot garbage, and we need to optimize it. We need to stop it because we're wasting money. At least we can kind of see that in the campaign reports. Big kind of things I'd normally kind of do is separate paid and organic social activity, because if you don't use UTM tagging, all of it's just going to dump under social, and you're going to have some organic activity, not a lot, but there'll be some people clicking on normal organic links in Facebook, and it's going to make your campaign look a little bit better than it really is, compared to, I want to see what happens on paid. I want to see what happens just organically and separate them out as much as possible. Email traffic, again, it's going to come up as either referral or direct unless we use the tagging. And we can actually do some things about measuring traffic from SMS or radio or TV, and that would be with SMS is kind of easy because people might click a link in the SMS, but radio or TV might just be, if it's my website.com/TV. Or /radio, and then we can put the tracking on that page. So there are some things we can do there where we get a little bit of visibility over offline as well. So with the channel groups, I mentioned these can totally be customized to whatever you kind of want to see in there. And just kind of keep in mind that Google goes through almost this kind of flow chart of deciding where the traffic came from. The first thing it checks for is the campaign tagging or UTM values, and that's how it overrides the rest of the list. Way down at the bottom is direct, and that just means Google has no idea where this traffic came from. It should be called an uncategorizable, because Google has no information about where the traffic came from. And there are a few reasons why that can come across. Again, probably a bit more than what we can get to today, but just kind of letting you know. Okay, let's kind of keep going. So custom reports. What you've probably already been looking through is a lot of the default reports in Google Analytics. They're totally, they're good, but sometimes you actually just might want to see a different kind of grouping of metrics. And that's kind of really the benefit of custom reports. So you can choose what is the dimension, what are the numbers that you want to see on the page. So what is the dimension and what are those metrics? Rather than just seeing this default list all the time, because you might be like, well, for whatever reason, I might not care to see all these numbers at once. I only want to see like 4 things, and I want to see them all. And I just don't want to have to kind of customize it all the time. I just want one report I can jump into to see these numbers. And that's where custom reports come in. So when you're in Google Analytics on the left-hand side, you've got customization under there, custom reports. And that's where you can kind of create these. They work the same way as the default reports. So the interface, it's all identical. It's just that you've chosen the metrics and you've chosen the dimensions that you want. All right, let me just kind of see if I can show you that for a moment. So I want to jump into Google Analytics. I'm in a test account which is live on a website. It's called the demo account for Google Analytics. If you want to set up, by all means, just search for Google Analytics demo account. I'm going to jump into custom reports. When you create a custom report, often the best way is start with kind of a question in mind, like what is it you want to look at? One I often quite liking is just with the campaign tracking values. So I'm gonna recreate that one. So I might just say, this one's all about like campaign tracking. And I've got default campaign tracking reports, but maybe I want a little bit of a different kind of twist on this one. We can create an Explorer report. That's just a normal where you can drill down through dimensions. I've got a flat table as well, which is like a spreadsheet. Then there's a map. I find the map is always next to useless, but maybe you have more luck with that one than I've ever had. But anyway, let's just look at this Explorer view. And let's just kind of, I'll just kind of repeat a report that already exists. I just want to look at the channel, and I'm also just going to choose some of these metrics. So I'm just going to grab, let's say the sessions, the bounce rate, and I'm really interested in a couple of goals that happen. So let's say I want to know about registrations. And I know on this site that's called goal 3 completions. And I also want to look at maybe, one of the other goals. I think they have one for purchase complete. Yep. Okay, there we go. And I'll just add in one more, just for good luck, whatever we have in here. Engaged users. Cool. Okay, so I've got the metrics, the numbers I'm looking at. It's really simple, just sessions and bounce rate. So how many visits came to the website? Of those, how many more or less just looked at one page? And then I've chosen 3 of the goals that they've set up. If you need more info about goals, we spoke about that a bit last week again. We can send out the checklist. If just let us know if you need to know more about that, or just literally search for Google Analytics goals. All right, so I've got those, and I just want to see them by the channel. I can pre-filter this as well. So if I only wanted to see certain information, I totally could, and I can filter based on pretty much everything in Google Analytics. All right, I'm going to save this. It's a pretty simple, quick report. I can change it at any other time as well. All right, let's see what we've got. So, got the channel, sessions, bounce rate, goal 3, goal 1, goal 2. And for this particular view, it's registrations, purchase complete, engaged users. Those goals could be whatever they are on your website. Now, one of the benefits of custom reports, which you might notice, is that I don't have to switch between the goals like I do in the default report. The default report just has the goals as a drop down on the end. And I have to switch between them to see how many times each one was completed. If I want to see this completions number side by side, like goal 3 next to goal 1, I can do that only through the customer report. And especially to have this breakdown by channel as well. So now I've got a much more focused report, and maybe this is all you need or all your internal stakeholders need. Really kind of beneficial feature of these reports is we can also share them. So you could be like, yep, this is good to go. I'm going to send it to my colleagues once every week on a Monday as like maybe a PDF or a PowerPoint, or a spreadsheet, whatever it is. And then you've done the reporting job. You know, you don't have to send them the data anymore, which could be a little bit manual to do it every kind of week. You just kind of create it once and set it to automate, and then you'll still have to do analysis of the results, but at least you've kind of automated some of that process. So that's kind of the benefit of custom reports, is really this kind of side-by-side kind of metrics, the conversion metrics side-by-side, which is great. And then just being able to choose these dimensions and metrics. I mentioned the flat report, which is this one here, a flat table. And a flat table, which it doesn't have the chart anymore. It shows it more or less as a spreadsheet, which is kind of all Google Analytics is at the end of the day, with some fancy charts. But let's say I wanted to see my channel next to my source and medium, next to maybe a campaign value as well. This is more about the UTMs that I use and how people get to the website. Normally in the reports, I can actually only see one dimension, and I can add in a second dimension, but now with the custom report, I can have up to 5. So here I've got the channel, the source and medium, the campaign. So I've got organic search, it's from Google. There's no campaign because, again, it's organic search, and how many sessions came through that way. And you can see I've got like another 111 rows in this report beyond just this initial first 10. So I get a lot more granular data here that I might not be able to see as easily in the other reports. And again, exporting, sending it to email, if you need that kind of data, if you need to look at like really specific information, you can also do that through some of the custom reports. So it's good for simplifying reports. It's good for making reports more complicated, which sounds a bit weird, but trust me, if you need to kind of dig into those details, the custom reports can sometimes be the way to do that. So again, the place to find that, customization, custom reports. Go have a play around. Like you can't break the underlying data in Google Analytics through the custom reports. So you're not gonna screw anything up. The other thing is when you create a custom report, it's for the user you're logged in as. So other people might not, they won't necessarily see those custom reports straight away, but there is an ability to share. So you can just share them with other people. They'll get a link that then just creates that same report in their login as well. And there's also like a gallery there too, so you can see other reports other people have created. All right, so it's going to finish up on just kind of one more kind of point about cleaning up some of the data. So we've talked about traffic and things with again campaign tagging. That's a good way of cleaning up some of the traffic that comes into your reports. The other kind of thing I normally see, which is problematic, is the content reports. They also tend to have a lot of duplication or just weird things going on. And so with the problem with these reports is that the content, the pages are listed pretty much just like Google Analytics just grabs the URL that people look at, and that's just dumped into the reports the way it is. The only thing it deletes by default are the UTM values. It won't just replicate those in your reports because that would be insane. It's saving those values somewhere else. One thing to look out for is just, do we have way more content in our reports than is actually on our website? So if you go into your all pages report, look at, I don't know, look at a couple months and then see like, oh, cool, like scroll down to the bottom and there's like 1 to 10 of however many rows of information. You're like 606 rows, like we've only got 40 pages on our website. And that's kind of a case of like, okay, cool, there's kind of duplication going on in the reports. There's kind of weird stuff going on, and it can just make it a bit harder to analyze about like which content people are looking at or what's going on. So one of the ways to find this problem is go into the reports. So I'll just kind of see if I can do this for a moment. So you want to go into that behavior, site content, all pages report. Again, look at a few months of data, depending on how big your website is. If you have tons of traffic, a few months might be a bit too much, but come into this all pages report. And then one of the easiest ways to find this sort of stuff is just to do a search for a question mark in this filter box that appears above the table. And then that'll show any pages that had what's called a query string. And this just means, okay, people look at the myaccount.html page, and then there's a query string, and the mode is billing address. And here's the mode is like view order. Anyway, so there's a bunch of, and this is specific to website. Now, in this kind of case for this website, I may be like, yeah, that's okay. Like I can leave all those values. They're totally fine. One to totally watch out for is you'll find a value called FB CLID. And it'll look like this, look like this kind of screenshot that I've included. FB CLID is the Facebook click ID. So every time someone clicks on a link from Facebook to your website, Facebook just plops that onto the end of the link. But that's actually useless in your Google Analytics report. It does nothing. And all it will do then is just mean you might have the same landing page, could be a home page, could be a campaign landing page. You'll have it listed like hundreds of times in the report, when really that value shouldn't have been saved that way. And so there is a way in Google Analytics to kind of strip that out of the page report, and that's kind of what we want to do. And that setting, it's up in View Settings. Again, it's kind of in the instructions we have. But if we go into Admin under View Settings, there is a place where we can ignore these parameters. And so in that case, I'll just kind of wait for it to load in a moment. We just say, oh yeah, ignore the FB CLID, Facebook click ID, because we don't want that value in our reports. All right, other reasons why we might get duplication in the pages is upper and lower case for the same page. Google Analytics will save them separately. So again, we can use a filter that will force all the pages to either upper or lower case. I highly recommend lowercase because there's nothing worse than looking at a report where it feels like every page is shouting at you. And as I kind of mentioned, the searching for the question mark is kind of a really good way to find some of this duplication. So there's a couple other kind of ways to kind of deal with grouping content, but I think for now, that's probably enough for today. So just kind of, I guess, just want to kind of touch on a few things that we do with Leafcutter, with Google Analytics and tag management. So again, we just kind of help people with their website analytics, helping them understand it, helping getting all these things tracked, like everything we spoke about today. We help with that setup and configuration, especially because that can take quite a lot of time to figure out. So we can help save that time. We can do auditing and management, all this sort of stuff with Google Analytics, as well as if there's tailored training or coaching that you guys need. We totally look after all of that. So I think for now, we'll kind of switch over to questions. But again, I just want to mention, we've got a checklist and kind of a guide with links for some of the things we spoke about today. Feel free to email us for a copy of that. It's events@leafcutter.com.au, and we'll get that over to you. So yeah, hopefully that was kind of good, and totally open to any kind of questions that people have.
Awesome, thanks Tim. We actually have got a question in at the moment from someone that's asked if you could explain the difference between direct and other traffic.
Yeah, sure, no worries, and thanks for that. So with the traffic that comes into your Google Analytics account, I'm just going to jump into the acquisition report. I mentioned that Google goes through this kind of checklist to figure out like where does that traffic come from. And the first thing is checking is those UTM values. to decide that. So with this kind of list, when it checks for those UTM values, it's like, okay, they've got a medium of CPC. I know what that is. That's paid search. Or they've got a medium of even social. They're like, I know what that is. That's a channel group of social. Or affiliates, again, a medium of affiliate or a medium of banner or display. Again, those channels exist. If there's a value you've used for a medium which Google doesn't know about, it's just going to drop it all into other. And again, we can change that so we can create new channels in this list. It's called a custom channel group. And again, that's just in the admin area. We've got, again, the guide can talk about some of that. So there's a way to, because I don't like traffic in other because I've then got to go into it and figure out where it came from. Direct is that uncategorizable traffic where Google Analytics has no idea. And that can happen because someone typed in the URL or they used a bookmark, that, as the name suggests, direct. It can also happen for a few other reasons. It could be that someone followed an email link in, say, Outlook, like the application, or the Mac Mail, the application. And when they click on that link, if there's no tagging on that email link, it can show up as direct in your reports. So I've seen a few people with a lot of emails going out, untagged email, could equal a lot of direct traffic. There's a few kind of other technical reasons, but normally I'm watching out for, say, if direct traffic is above, say, 20%, and you've got like a couple thousand visits a month, then that might be an indication that there's like a reason behind it. So it's something to watch out for.
Awesome. All right, we've got another question here. So we've got someone that's asking, should we be using URLs for our UTM source? And as a related question, if we don't include a source, will it always pick up the URL?
Yeah, good question. So I think it was, so should they use our URLs with the source? Is that right?
So the first question was, should we be using URLs for our UTM source?
Okay, cool. Yeah, not the full, like you don't need to do the full URL. So you wouldn't be doing like, so let's say I'm on this RSPCA side and I'm like on the, like who we are, like I wouldn't use the full, I just use the domain. Like the domain is kind of enough to be like, here's the source of the link. You can, normally the referrer, which is like the extent, like the full kind of link is saved elsewhere in Google Analytics. I'd have to double check if it's kind of, sometimes it's kind of dropped information, like it's not actually remembered. I'll just have to double check that one. But yeah, so normally I do use the domain as the source, and sometimes that's it can be a bit tricky. Like if it's mail, if you're sending out emails, well, the link, it doesn't really live anywhere. It's like what's in people's inboxes, right? So in that case, I might use a source of like MailChimp or Active Campaign or Campaign Monitor, like whatever the tool is that sent the email. In that instance, but normally I'm always shooting for the domain, and the reason for that is, let's say I've got links from a website, and I might have like a paid link and organic link. I want to be able to report by that website as a whole, and then I want to be able to report on that website as like paid and organically. And if I don't have the sources the same between those two, then I'm going to have like two rows in my list of sources, and they're going to mean the same place, which will be problematic. And second part of the question, sorry, I've totally forgotten.
No, that's all right. The second part of the question was, if we don't include a source, will it always pick up the URL?
That is if you leave the source kind of blank, then it will just blank out the source and just say not set. I'll have to double check, but this has kind of changed a couple times between, I know that, because the guideline used to be like medium, source, and campaign are all, you have to include them, all three. But I know that it's still, sometimes it can still work. Like if you just choose medium, I think it just does the source is not set. I'll just have to kind of double check that. I'll make sure it's kind of as a point in the like guidelines that kind of goes out, because I just want to kind of make sure I'm giving the right advice on that one.
Awesome, thanks, Tim. All right, got another question here. Is the only way to utilize a UTM tracker to spend money on an ad campaign? Is there no way to use them without spending?
Yeah, no, good kind of question. No, yeah, no, not at all. Like it's definitely not a paid. It doesn't have to be paid because it's UTMs are for any links going to your website. By the way, never use them internally on your website. That just ruins some of the tracking or the attribution in Google Analytics. But so if you think about all the ways that you get traffic to your website, well, it could be that you're posting organic links on Facebook and you just tag up those links, or it could be emails that you send out which, okay, that costs money to send an email, but it's like the marginal cost might be like a couple cents, so it's almost free. And it could just be links from partner organizations to your organization website. So you can tag all those links coming to your website. There's nothing about it that has to be paid. It's just ways to group and regroup and aggregate traffic coming to your website. So it doesn't have to be a paid activity, but it's obviously useful when it is done with paid activity.
Cool. All right. I think we've got the last question here.
All right.
So is paid search just for Google Ads, or does it include social paid ads? If it does include it, does it double count the click in the social and the paid search?
Cool. No, good question. So paid search is meant to just be for traffic from search engines, not just Google, but if you do paid search advertising on Bing, which hardly anyone does, but if you happen to be one of the lucky few, and also Yahoo, any other kind of search engine, it's just a way of grouping that traffic together. Paid search should not include traffic from Facebook or Instagram or any social channels. That should be recorded as a separate channel. Now, the problem is that not every agency or not every kind of team of marketers understand that if you use a medium of CPC, that will automatically put the traffic into paid search, CPC being an acronym for cost per click. So Google Analytics has a rule, it's CPC, okay, that is now part of paid search. When really, I either want to put it into social or I want to put it ideally into a paid social channel, a new channel that I create. So if you go into your channels report, if you go into paid search and you find, there's like Facebook is in there, it shouldn't be in there. And that just means that someone's used CPC as the medium when really it should be a different kind of medium in there rather than that. So that's kind of an oversight, because I know that Facebook recommends or has recommended previously, I'll just use CPC as the medium. That's bad advice, because it just means that Google Analytics will allocate it into paid search. And again, we can kind of link to a couple of resources for that in the guide.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tim.
Super.
Look, thanks for presenting today, and thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you learned a lot from the presentation and that we managed to get through your questions. If you do have any that come to mind later, obviously Tim shared his contact details at the start of the webinar. Will be at the slides, but you can also email us at events@connectingup.org and we can tackle that offline as well. Tim, any last words from you or the rest of the team there?
No, just hey, thanks everyone for taking the time to attend, and hopefully we can get those guides over to you and help you out in the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Don't forget, everyone, the recording will be available on the website later, and a link for the recording will be sent out, so do keep an eye out on your inbox. Otherwise, thank you for being with us and have a fantastic day.